Hi, and welcome to a new episode of Garmology, a podcast about clothes and stuff. Now, today we're off to Ireland to talk about Tweed. Welcome, Kieran. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi Nick. My name's Kieran Molloy, and I own Molloy and Sons Weaving with my dad Sean, and we specialise in making Donegal tweed, and we're based in Ardara on the west coast of Donegal.
I did actually have to have a peek on Google Maps this morning to find out just where you were.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, is it a bit out in the middle of nowhere, on the edge of nowhere?
Yeah, well, it takes a while to get most places. It's like 3 hours from Dublin, 2.5 to Belfast, and it's in like a small village called Ardara, and there's probably about maybe, I don't know, are you talking like 1,000 people in a like 5K radius probably? And that's like basically Ardra is like where Donegal tweed comes from.
Right.
Yeah.
And that has been occurring for quite a while now, I believe.
Yeah, so I'm the sixth generation of the family that's a weaver on the same spot. And like obviously that's me based on looking at the census records and stuff. I don't know if there were like previous generations that were also weavers. We haven't found out yet, but still an ongoing research project.
So sixth generation that you know of. I mean, what's the sort of history been like for Molloy Tweed?
Yeah, so it hasn't been like one single business the whole way through. It's kind of been a lot of different businesses. So the first two generations would have been hand weavers, weaving and selling in the local area. And then my great granddad and great granduncle would have started exporting Donegal tweed as soon as Ireland became a free state. So up until 1922, everything would have had to gone via the UK. And then in 1923, they would have started exporting to the US and Europe and that. And so they opened a showroom on Fifth Avenue, so the corner of Fifth Avenue and 40th, so just opposite the public library, in 1923. And then they had a warehouse in the meatpacking district, and they were selling Donegal tweed to mostly, it would have been tailors then, because there wasn't really very much ready to wear. And they would have been over and back 3 or 4 times a year, because you can see the records going in and out through Ellis Island. And yeah, so they were doing basically the exact same thing as I'm doing now 100 years ago. Over in New York and selling tweed. Yeah.
It sounds like there must have been a certain volume then.
Yeah, like there would have been quite a bit of demand, and they had like a little factory so that they had some weavers who were working in the mill, and then a lot of the industry would have been cottage industry. So every family would have had a loom in their house, in like a little shed or in the end room of the house. And that was like in Ardara, the vast majority of families in the whole area, there was a weaver or 2 weavers. And people were weaving in their house and then selling to like businesses who are exporting, so like Molloy's or McNeilis's or McGee's or like different businesses, and they would kind of gather up the different orders and then they would sell them on. So it was a bit more of a cottage industry than it is now.
Sounds like it was rather more like Harris Tweed is operating today.
Yeah, where it was all woven in the person's home and then sold on, whereas now it's a lot more. There are still some hand weavers, but the vast majority will be woven in like the different mills and on power looms. And then there's like a few other hand weavers and other hand weaving businesses. But the vast majority of the production now would be on power looms.
Yeah. So what happened from the 20s and onwards?
So that business would have carried on until the 50s. And then that would have been more so my great granduncle, his business, and then he passed away, and then his sons, I guess, maybe weren't as interested, so that business stopped. And then my granddad would have set up his business in the mid to late 50s. So It's been like lots of different businesses along the way. Yeah, so my granddad would have started, and he would have been going to the US, selling tweed around, like going to the different like Macy's or to like Saks or different brands around the US. And then he would have started going to Japan in the early 60s, and would have, like, he'd done an awful lot of traveling. And it was different back then, I guess, landing to Japan in the mid 60s with, maybe you've seen a few pictures in a National Geographic or something.
I,
Yeah.
I was curious about that. That's kind of why I mentioned to start with that you seem to be on the edge of nowhere, that it must be awfully far from where you are to, say, Tokyo,
Yeah.
both
Yeah.
in miles and also in culture and
Yeah.
busyness.
Yeah. Yeah. Very different. But it's always been, like, I guess for our family, it's always been export focused. Like, you have to go somewhere to try and sell. You can't just kind of sit here in Donegal and hope that all the business is going to come to you and come knocking on the door. Yeah.
Although I imagine there are quite a few people who do come knocking, wanting to see.
Yeah, some, but still, it's the vast majority of like all their productions export. Like, it would be like probably 80%. Yeah.
So you and your father
Yes.
started, what, some 15 years ago or so?
Yeah, around 2010, myself and my dad started Molloy and Sons.
That's when you became serious about weaving again.
Yeah, so I had, like, always, the mill has been like the sheds beside my parents' house. It's literally like 3 meters from my parents' house, where the looms are, and that's always where they've been. And it was like, so we've grown up with like the weavers outside, and always the threat for me when I was going to school, and for my brother as well, was like, if you don't study and do your homework, you're going to end up out in the shed with your father. Like, the main threat from my mom. So then, like, I would have studied industrial design in college in Dublin, and then did that for a couple of years, and then came back around, I guess, 2009 ish, and then we started up Molloy and Sons in 2010.
You came back to start weaving. Was that because you just
Oh,
couldn't
the
stay away, or was it
recession.
industrial design was so tedious?
The recession, where I was working, doing a design job, and then got laid off, and then came back, and then I knew, like, I had been, I guess, as you get older, you start to appreciate a bit more what the family history is and what possibility there is there. Whereas maybe when you're a teenager, you're mostly, trying to rebel against the idea of what everyone else has been doing for generations.
The bright lights.
Yeah.
I mean, now though, you're basically working from home, I guess.
Yeah, not far from it. Yeah.
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 So, as a young man, I mean, coming back to work on the looms,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
did that feel okay? I mean, did you feel you were picking up family history? I mean, I'm always impressed when families talk about 6 generations and so forth, and you think, does every young person grow up knowing that when they come of age, they're taking over and their son will take over, or their daughter? What impression?
No, none whatsoever. Like, I don't think it was expected either of, like, me or my brother would have started into the weaving industry. Like, I definitely had, like, was interested in it and would have been out watching the looms going, and the odd time when they're making like random blankets and stuff, getting to pick colors, and maybe going to the finishing factory with my dad, or going to the yarn factory or stuff like this. But it wasn't like an idea at all that that's what you're going to be doing. And it's just like, that was, I think, very much my own choice to come back. Yeah. And just,
So
sorry.
these days, what is your sort of role in it? Is it lots of different things, or
Yeah. So there's 6 of us all together. So me, my dad, my mom, one of my aunts, one of my uncles, and we hired Christopher. He started about a year ago now, so he's getting used to the family dynamics of the whole thing.
kind of sounds like he's the diversity hire because he's the guy in the family.
Yeah. So, like, initially when we started Molloy and Sons, that it was just myself and my dad doing everything, and then slowly have hired more family members, and now we've had to dip outside the family knowledge pool.
But I guess he lives nearby.
Yeah, close enough. Yeah. So like my job is, you know, sales and doing emails, and then also like I'll do knotting or warping or fixing a loom if something's broken or inspecting the fabric, or it's all sorts of jobs. um
And I guess even though you've moved to power looms now, there's still a lot of manual labor going on.
yeah, like so the warping is still similar to how you're warping for going into a hand loom. Like we'd have the same kind of warper, like production warper, as in Harris Tweed, or a lot of the other mills is like a Hattersley warper from the, I guess it's from the like 80s. But that's like entirely analog. It's not computerized in any way. And so like there's a lot of different things that need to be fixed and adjusted, and even like swapping between different patterns in the loom. You're setting up, knotting in, like there's still an awful lot of manual labor. The weaving's probably sometimes the shortest bit of the whole process. So especially making samples. So like this time of the year, I've sort of finished most of my sale strips, and we're doing sample length. So that's short runs for brands to use for their runway shows or for their trade shows. And but it could be like a day of warping, a day of setting up the pattern, another day for setting up the loom, and then you're literally weaving for 2 hours, and then out of the loom and mend, inspection, and then it goes to finishing. But the actual weaving bit can be very short, especially at this time of the year. And then so there's an awful lot of these manual jobs in the setup. Maybe the actual weaving part, obviously you can look after a couple of looms, like one weaver can look after a couple of looms, keeping the weft going and fixing broken warps and stuff like that. But it's all the other jobs, the preparation, and then afterwards that take an awful lot of time.
Do people appreciate the amount of attention that goes into it? I mean, I think it's easy to think that once that loom is going, you can just go and have a cup of tea and put your legs up.
um, Probably not. Like, so a lot of our fabrics, like literally from the yarn, like we're working with the yarn spinner and making all our own yarn colors and picking like the base color, picking the different nep colors. And so like every little stage, there's quite a bit of work. It's not the same as, let's say, a mill weaving, I don't know, let's say a cotton mill where you're weaving just plain weave cotton that's going to go and get dyed, where you're literally putting in, a 2,000 meter beam, and that's just weaving, and that's all that loom's ever going to do. And maybe you have a full factory just doing one or two products, and you're not having to chop and change all the time, whereas we're literally chopping and changing non-stop. So we're like, it's a tiny mill, there's only 4 looms, but we're always changing setups, changing gear for different fabrics, for doing blankets or scarves, or like lighter weight fabrics, heavier weights, different patterns. So it's a lot more taking gear out of loom and putting gear back into loom, changing patterns. Yeah.
I'm curious about because in the 20s it was all to New York and fancy places. Where the Tweed is going these days, I think I read that when you started up again 15 years ago, the Japanese market was very quick to adopt you.
Yeah.
How's that been going?
Yeah. So like, I'm literally this past 2 weeks, I was in Japan for a week, in Korea for a week. The Japanese market, to be honest, for this past 2 years has been down quite a bit. I think just the exchange rate with the yen and inflation sort of having a bit more impact. so their buying power has gone down quite a bit in comparison to like 10 years ago. Um, and also just I think the impact of COVID, where previously everyone was wearing suits, whereas now it's moved a little bit more casual, and um, that's probably had a bigger impact for us in Japan than in other markets. So, and then for us, Korea has been doing pretty well. Like it's been busy this past couple of years. They're a lot more into overcoats than like casual suits. Isn't really as popular over there. Um, and then the US has been a big part of our business always. Yeah. So that's so like this year I've been in where UK a couple of times, in the US, in China, in Milan, in Japan and Korea, and probably a couple more trips to go this year.
Wow, you certainly get around.
Yeah, so this 3 hours to the airport, that really adds it on when you're on the way back from Japan, and you've had a stopover in Amsterdam, and then you've the 3 hour drive home afterwards.
Mm, mm. So, do you find that the popularity of Donegal tweed varies, or is that pretty constant?
No, I think it's very cyclical. Like at the minute, it's quite popular, but like maybe a couple of years ago, it wasn't. So it's you kind of see this where people obviously want a tweed jacket in their collection, but maybe they go with like a more Shetland style, and then they maybe go a Harris tweed style, and then they go a Donegal style, or then they might go a fancy tweed, or so it does move around quite a bit. And some years it's very popular, and some years it's not as popular. So even within um, our fabrics that we're weaving, we do a lot of Donegal tweed. That would be the vast majority of our production. But then we're also doing like lambswool styles or more heather styles without neps in it. Just that's what some customers want. And we try and develop things to suit different customers, whether like to try and that we can sell them something, as opposed to if they don't want a Donegal this season, we may as well try and offer them another fabric. And like we're very willing to develop different patterns, different fabrics for different customers.
Mm. Now, that was something I wanted to ask you about, because there is a movement, has been for years now, to have Donegal tweed protected in a sort of similar way to Harris tweed,
Yeah, yeah,
so that it has to come from actually from Donegal.
yeah. So
Can you tell me a bit about that?
our we're hoping that that happens. So what a Donegal tweed is a fabric with the little neps or spots of color in the fabric. So those spots are added during the yarn production process, and then woven, or so the idea is that we can try and get Donegal tweed protected so that it's only can be called Donegal tweed if it has been produced in Donegal, so in the county. And we've formed an association with the other weavers, so like us and McGee's and McNutt's, Studio Donegal, and some of the hand weavers, and we're going to be applying to get Donegal tweed protected. So the EU has introduced a new law that, in the same way as champagne or Parma ham or different like basically wines and foodstuffs are currently protected, so that we can get Donegal protected in the same way.
Because the sort of misuse of the Donegal name has been pretty rife. I think one of the worst ones I saw was a mill in the north of England. They were making a Donegal which was pure cotton,
Yeah, yeah,
but it had the neps, hence it was Donegal. But
yeah. So it's
neither wool
like
nor
we
Irish.
have customers and they're buying fabric in, or not. To be honest, they're probably not customers, but they might ask us for a price for Donegal, and then they're like, "Well, that's like 3 times as much as we're getting it from our mill in Turkey," and you're like, "But maybe it's not wool; it could be like mostly synthetic, but it has the little spots of color." And they're like, "Well, it's a Donegal, so that this is
Yeah.
so there's let's say there's mills in Turkey or Portugal or China or at one trade show I went to recently, there was people from a mill in Pakistan came to show me their Donegals, and they're like selling it as Donegal tweed. Like the Donegal is spelled a bit like more phonetically.
Right.
Yeah, it's like literally they're like, here's our amazing Donegals. Um, and so it's a lot of mills, yes, are selling it as a Donegal, but then there's also different fashion brands might be just using Donegal as an added description. So whether it even has neps in it or not, sometimes you might read like looking through different garments and it might be just described as a Donegal tweed, but it could just be like a plain weave or some sort of tweedish jacket and they're just adding it in as a descriptor, whereas it doesn't have neps, it doesn't have a character or aesthetic that's similar to Donegal. So our hope is that if we are successful getting Donegal tweed protected, that then only fabric woven in County Donegal to a certain recipe can be called Donegal tweed.
Is being 100% wool part of that?
Not at the minute. Well, so like traditionally, like even 100 years ago, my like granddad or great granddad, they would have been importing yarn from the UK because the spinner here mightn't have been able to make like the yarn style that they want or the correct, like they wanted a finer yarn, so they could have been using like a wool cashmere or wool silk or different. Even then, they would have been using different blends. So we'll be doing 100% natural in the description, but not necessarily just 100% wool.
Okay, well, that was my sort of follow-up question. That would it be natural?
Yeah, no, like the intention isn't to have like a 20% polyester version.
No, we can talk more about that. So yes, I mean, yeah, the wool doesn't necessarily come from your backyard. I remember when I was in the Hebrides and I was seeing all these sheep about, and I inquired whether these were the basis of the tweed.
Mm-hmm.
And no, they're the wrong type. They
Yeah,
go to carpets on the mainland, and the
yeah,
mainland wool comes to the Hebrides. And
yeah. So that's similar here, where the vast majority of wool from Irish sheep is not being used in the fashion industry. Like the sheep are being bred for their meat, and the wool is very much a byproduct for for some breeds of sheep. And then it's mostly is going to the UK and getting scoured over there, and realistically, it's getting homogenized into British wool, a big percentage of it. And then if it's like the lamb's wool part of Irish wool, because they aren't shearing the sheep before they send it to the slaughterhouse, so the vast majority then of those skins are all like going to China or India or different places,
okay.
and with the wool attached. So maybe the better part of the wool, sometimes like the lamb's wool, a lot of the time isn't actually getting used. Maybe it's turning into carpet yarn somewhere else.
Yeah, there's all these little secrets of the sort of garment industry of
Yeah, like one of
how much stuff is being sent all around the place.
yeah, like what ends up happening a lot of that where the wool is still attached to the hide, it gets removed after the sheep has been like slaughtered. So the fleece is taken off, but then that whole hide goes to, let's say, China or India or somewhere else, and then the wool is removed after that point. So it's called slipe wool then, where you're getting, because you use like, I don't know, like a hair removal product, basically. They
Okay.
cover the hide, and then it means you get a longer fiber. Whereas if it's sheared, there's still probably going to be like an inch of wool, like in the sheep. And then then that's hair removal basically, and then that wool is called slipe, and that's used in lots of different ways.
Learn something every day. Now, you mentioned synthetics.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get requests to add synthetics to your tweets?
Yeah, yeah. Like it depends. Like obviously, people are like, well, maybe we're not the cheapest place to buy wool in the world, and they're like, well, what if you add in 20% polyester or nylon, and like it'll reduce the price. but it's not something we're currently doing. So, but we're asked like quite often to like, could you put in like 40% polyester, and then it'll make it a more appealing price for like a much cheaper brand, I guess. For they're after a price point for their fabric.
So that would purely be to reduce the price, not like it's sometimes put forward that it will make it a much better tweed, it will make it a superior product.
Like maybe if you added some nylon to make it a little bit stronger for like wear. So like let's say if you're making a pair of pants, perhaps if you added nylon, or if you're making upholstery fabric and you added some more nylon into it, it would be a little bit harder wearing. But it's not currently something that we're doing. We're like, from a personal point, I kind of want to stick with 100% natural fibers.
I support you fully there.
Yeah, like even sometimes we're doing like boucle loop, like boucle mohair kind of fabrics, and the binder in that is a lot of time it's like there's 5% nylon in that. So to me, I like don't particularly want to use that anymore. But it's still in a lot of that yarn. You can get 100% like a wool mohair version. But some brands want to use it. So we're trying to like reduce that out of our production as well. Because there's no real benefit. Like, why can't we just do 100% natural fabrics? Like, it's better for...
It's interesting because it's often put forth in different ways. Like, it was interesting that you were saying it was really just a cost way of making it cheaper. They will tend to say that it makes it such a superior product, so we should appreciate the fact that they've blended in all the synthetics.
So sometimes if you can use then a shorter wool fiber, and then use more like polyester, nylon, and acrylic, there'll be longer fibers. So yes, you can use the shorter fiber wool and get like still a stronger yarn. Whereas if you just use that short fiber wool, the yarn wouldn't be very good. So it's kind of, you can use a cheaper wool product and mixed with the synthetic product and get a stronger yarn. But you could just use a slightly better wool to start.
Yeah. It's sort of taking the crummy bits and sort of propping them up with synthetics and trying to make it acceptable, I guess.
Yeah. But sometimes you can get like a really amazing handle by using some of these synthetics and using the shorter fibers. And that's some brands' speciality. Or like there's quite a big industry in recycled wool and recycled polyester, recycled nylon. And so that's like recycled garments where they shred them back up again and make new yarn. And so you can get like amazing looking yarns and really good handle, but the 50% synthetic and 10% other fibers, because they can't even determine what it's been made from.
That's interesting that you mentioned the other fibers.
Yeah.
Because there was a fabric I've been trying to investigate recently where there was 30% wool, 30% polyester, and 40% other. And even the brand couldn't tell me what this other was. They suggested it was sort of fluff that sort of occurred in the place where they made the yarn.
Something like that. But it's because they've shredded down like thousands and thousands of garments, and the blend is all over the place. Like maybe there's a 20% polyester or 80% polyester, 20% wool, cotton, and different stuff, and it's just all been shredded down into a fiber, and that's been added in.
Is it fair then to call it a wool fabric?
Depends on the percentage, I guess. Wool-ish.
30 plus, but I don't know. It annoys me terribly. So I do really appreciate the tweeds that are 100% natural.
Yeah.
And you also have that environmental aspect where at least a wool that is, say a tweed that is 100% natural, you can compost or you can recycle.
Yeah, like
this sort of mystery mixes.
Yeah.
Oh, what was I going to do? Yes. I completely lost my thread. Sorry. um, okay, so your natural, 100% natural fibre tweeds and the Donegal neps. Am I saying Donegal right?
Donegal.
Because some people say Donegal, some say Donegal.
Let's be more on the Donegal side.
Gaul. Okay. So tell me all about the neps.
So like the a lot of our tweeds, the heavier weight tweeds, or like medium weight, heavier weight, it's called a burr. So that's a different bit of fiber. So that's in the worsted process. Do you know the difference between woolen and worsted?
I'd love for you to tell me
Okay.
because
So,
I keep coming across it and I sort of have a vague idea, but
so in the
let me
worsted
hear it.
process, you need longer fibers, and they all are aligned in a straight line. They're all like nice
Okay.
and smooth in a straight line, and then they're twisted, and that makes your yarn. But in the woolen process, the first stage of the carding machine aligns them in a straight line, but then they're turned 90 degrees on the carding machine and then are combed the other way. So the yarn is much fluffier and the fibers are like in different directions. And there's a lot more, the cross section of the yarn becomes much bigger. Whereas in the worsted process, the wool is all combed in a straight line and all the fibers are aligned and then it's twisted. So it's much smoother and the cross section is much smaller. And so the first stage, that combing process to make the worsted yarn, that's the shorter fibers that are combed out. That's what becomes the burrs that become the little spots of color in our Donegals.
Right,
So,
because
that,
yeah,
so it's that's where nowadays the more modern technique of making those neps where they come from. So it's like a byproduct of the worsted spinning process. So like for us to get, or for the spinner to get, let's say 2 tons of neps, the where they've processed in a different factory, they've processed maybe like 100 tons almost of wool to make into like a worsted yarn. Maybe not quite 100, maybe we're more like 50. But it's like a huge amount of wool is to be processed to get like the amount of neps that are being used. And so that's like nowadays where it comes from. But the traditional idea of where the neps come from in a Donegal would be all traditionally like the white would be the color of the sheep, and then it's quite easy to make like a black using natural dyes, using like oak and some like peat and different stuff. Like it's quite easy to make a dark gray, dark black color, and so the traditional would have been light colored warp and dark colored weft, just this high contrast. And then to make brighter colors like reds or blues or oranges or greens, it was more difficult to gather up the dye stuffs for that. So that instead of trying to dye like 50 kilos of an orange, they only would have dyed like a couple of kilos, like in a like basically in a bucket or a dye like a small dye pot. And then they got that and chopped it up into little bits. And as they were carding the wool, they were sprinkling in these bright colors. And that's what gave the fabric like a more visual interest. Whereas in, let's say, in Scotland, where a check is more common and more popular, that essentially we had the same dye stuffs and the same like landscape. So instead of where in Donegal we were chopping it up into little bits and sprinkling all these dots of color throughout the fabric, they were making individual yarn,
yeah.
individual ends of yarn from those small amounts of brighter colors. And that's kind of the difference between like a check pattern and like a Donegal pattern. Because realistically, with the same wool, with the same landscape, with the same like natural dye stuffs available to us, and just different ways of developing something that's a bit more visually interesting and aesthetic. It's not like a pure accident that you were using white wool and then a big orange dot came in the middle of it. Like it was thought about in a logical way. Yeah,
I can just sort of see this happening. These guys sitting there, sort of, how can we add some visual interest and sprinkling this
yeah,
these little bits
yeah,
on? And
yeah.
yeah, I think you've got it.
Also, it was a way maybe of them recycling. So let's say they had made a sweater or something, or socks that were like red or a different color, that when they were worn out and they darned them and put patches on them or whatever, but then eventually they were kind of finished. So then they would have been like chopped up into little bits and added in to add more like color and to reuse things, because they weren't like just chucking things out once they weren't in good shape.
That's a that's a good piece of storytelling, really. Do you find that when you're out on your sales tours,
Mhm.
there is much interest in the sort of historicness of the tweed, or is it more we like your tweed? Is there a sort of full package?
I think the provenance is so important that like we can say that we're making authentic, real Donegal tweed. We've been making it for generations, and this is like where Donegal tweed should come from. And yes, a big part of what we're selling is the story, but also it's very important that you're selling like the fabric. Like we can't just go back every year with a black and white plain weave. Like there has to be iterations and changes and new colors and developing things. And while we try and stay away from like the really trend based colors, that it like we're not a big enough mill to develop a whole new color range every season. So really our colors need to be a bit more classic, even though they can be more brights or different things. The colors still need to be a bit more classic, that we can use them every year. Even though like some years browns are going to be more popular and some years navies are going to be more popular, or grays different years, but every year you have to be making new ranges, new patterns, new colors, new samples. You can't keep going back to someone with the same bunch of swatches every season.
That's really surprising to hear, because from the outside it seems like tweed situation is pretty stable. There's no one rocking the boat. It is pretty much business as usual.
Yeah,
But
but
now you're telling me that every year is sort of new.
yeah, but literally every year we have to make new patterns, new colors, even if it means like the newness is that it becomes more interesting for the person picking the swatches,
Hmm.
but then they might still go back to a mid grey herringbone.
Okay.
But you still have to show new stuff every season. But we definitely have like our kind of standards that are like our base mid sort of weight plain weaves, mid weight herringbones that are very popular. The like standard quality that we do, but you still need to be making these other more interesting things just to show different options and possibilities. And then a part of it is like these are things to start off a conversation with the customer, and then like we can develop things from there. So if they like something but they want to change the pattern or change the size of a herringbone or add a check pattern, or like to show adaptability and different possibilities.
Sort of on a personal level, what are your favourites?
Well, I like the really bright things, but that's not necessarily what the vast majority of our work is. And but also the developing new patterns and new colors is like I really like that. Like working with the spinner and going in and making up the new yarns. So you come with an idea, like okay, I want to make like a mid grey, but I want like loads of bright neps in it. So then you sort of decide on the grayness that you want, like what tone, whether like 10%, 20%, 30% black mixed with it, and then add like pick the different nep colors. Yeah, so I really enjoy that end of it. But that sort of design part of it for each collection is really like a few weeks every year. It's not like that's kind of a concentrated period of like developing new stuff, and then a huge part of the year is about production and then sales as well.
So the design phase that isn't coming from outside, is it a family affair
No,
coming up
that's
with you?
just myself and my dad that do all the design work. Yeah. So based on like I don't know, patterns and colors that we've seen, or based on like old swatches, like old swatch books we have, and also just our own kind of like idea, and from talking to customers throughout the year, like what we think we need to do, and also to like broaden our the patterns and stuff that we're offering, so to always be showing a bit something a bit different or trying to show the new things. But really, that design phase of the year is quite like short. Yeah.
For those few short weeks, you're part of the sort of international fashion scene, coming up with.
I don't know if it's that, but yeah, like if we're a much bigger mill, I definitely enjoy spending a lot more time doing the design work than the production end of ordering yarns and figuring out quantities and planning which fabric needs to go into which loom and what needs to be warped next. Or yeah, the design end is definitely what I enjoy more.
Mm. I still find it very, very fascinating that you can be situated in this quite remote, small place, but
Mhm.
still having influence all over the world with wonderful fabrics.
I don't know how much influence we have, but we try and make it a bit prettier.
Just thinking that someone in Korea is walking around with a jacket made of your tweed or
Yeah, yeah.
far flung places. It's
No, it's
quite a
kind of like
wonderful
when you
idea.
go, like sometimes you're walking around and you'll spot one, like someone wearing a coat from your fabric, and that's really cool. Like, and even if they're like, it's a bit creepy though to go and say, "Oh, I'm in that fabric."
I
Some
was
people
going to
don't
ask if you
like
dash over and
it.
have you ever done that?
A few times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do they freak out or do they think, oh,
well, it depends.
thank you?
Depends on the person.
Uh,
Yeah.
And how dark the alley is. And uh, you'll notice I put a bit up in the background here.
Mhm.
That might be
Yeah,
a fabric you recognize.
yeah. Are they both bureau jackets?
Both bureau jackets, uh,
Yeah,
5, 6 years ago or something.
yeah, yeah.
Or
So I have
around
one
there.
of them here as well, but I think I have like a jacket that's the like a green check jacket, um, the engineered garments one, and that's like more a garment washed style, which is quite
Right.
different than the vast majority of our customers that we sell to. The fabric is like it's more of a pressed finish,
Right.
whereas what they did was more of a garment wash, so it's much like fluffier than and like the texture is very different. Maybe it ends up feeling a bit more like a knit than an actual like pressed tweed fabric.
Right.
Yeah,
That makes sense because it does have a sort of rumpled finish.
yeah,
It
yeah,
does feel very soft.
yeah. So it's more like a garment washed. I don't know if they actually garment washed them or if they did a second finish on the fabric after they got it.
Okay. So was this fabric that was specially ordered?
Yeah, so that was we did. I think did we do 2 seasons that we did or 3 seasons that we did with the
I think it
bureau,
might have been two.
and one we did like two coat or two jackets and pants, and then the other we did maybe it must have been 3 years, and then are they both parkas?
Those are both the Madison Parker. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think one year they did coats, and then they did 2 years of like more of a jacket and suit.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, I really like them. Like all of them, they're really cool. Like, and then just because the different texture than most of our fabrics made them like just quite different.
Oh.
So I have two of the jackets, and I think of one of them that's like a full suit. Yeah,
Do you know how that came about? It's quite an interesting idea. It's sort of engineered garments in New York and
yeah,
the bureau in
yeah.
Belfast.
Well, I
You
think
guys,
um, Michael and um,
or
Paul, yeah, they had bought some fabric from us. So they're from Belfast, and I think both of them would have like spent quite a bit of time in Donegal over the years, and I guess we're interested in doing some Donegal tweed garments. And one year we did like a small run of baseball caps with Ebbett's flannels,
Mhm.
and then they kind of expanded that because they're one of the main like retailers for engineered garments,
Yeah.
and so I think they wanted to do a special or a couple of specials, so they bought some fabrics like or pick swatches, and we made fabrics for them and shipped it over. And yeah, that I think went well. Did it a couple of times after that. Yeah.
How much sort of working with brands and makers and fashion houses or that type of thing do you normally do?
It very much depends on the brand. Like sometimes it's someone will send us an email asking to see some swatches, and they'll say, I want a brown plain weave, and they'll be very specific, and we'll send a few options and then not hear anything and then get a PO for a bulk order. And others, it's like a very much developing different patterns, developing samples. So it just depends on the brand. Some people want to develop everything, like develop a yarn, pick the nep colors, pick the base color. They want a special like weight of fabric, different texture. So it some people will like look at loads of different swatches and then narrow it down and pick a few things, and others were developing everything from the fiber to the finished fabric, and they want like input into every stage.
Mm.
So yeah, so some brands were like, we'll develop a yarn size, the nep colors, they get to pick everything and then do like sample different weaves and then do the production, but also they might want a certain finish, whether like a really hard pressed finished or like a slight brush or raised finish. Just depends on the customer. And some of the bigger brands, maybe it if it's on their mood board for the season, you'll get an order. And some brands, they want to work with you like every season, kind of consistently. And yeah, there's a huge amount of variability. And
Mm.
sometimes the bigger fashion houses, if it fits on the mood board and you have stock sitting so that they can sample immediately, then you're much better chance of getting a bulk order.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, when you describe it like that, all the options for what they can order, I was having this discussion with someone the other day about the differences between Harris Tweed and Donegal Tweed, and I was saying that well, there's many types of Harris Tweed, and I see now that Donegal Tweed isn't one specific quality either. So really, our discussion was completely idiotic.
Well, like we have fabrics from, let's say, 250 grams up to like a kilo. So a huge range of like weights. But then it could
Mm.
also be like, let's say, merino cashmere yarn or merino alpaca or like a lot more different yarn options and yarn qualities than maybe a lot of the Harris tweed. It's like it's sort of one set kind of fiber that they're using. There's not a huge variation in like a cashmere or a merino or angora, or they're not using a variety of fibers. Whereas because Donegal tweed hasn't had these set rules,
Mm.
that there was a lot more variability in the products that we're making, and also because like now we're all mostly all using power looms, we can do a lot more patterns
Mm.
because we're doing like dobbies with like up to let's say 16 or 18 frames, so you can do much more complicated patterns than on a Harris tweed loom where the vast majority of them are using just 8 or 4 frames. So you're limited in the weave structures that you can produce.
Oh. I was quite disappointed to find recently that the Hattersley looms, the sort of classic Harris Tweed loom,
Yeah,
there's only about 0.1% of the tweed that's still made on those, and the rest are using the rapier looms
yeah,
now,
yeah. But
which of course rationally makes a lot of sense. But
it's to do with demand from the factories, like the CMT factories. So it's more difficult for them to cut out of a single width fabric than it is a double width fabric, because all the like garment factories in the world basically now are set up for double width fabric, and that's where the demand has shifted. Because if you maybe a big factory in China probably don't really want to see a load of single width fabric, it'll be a bit tricky for them.
So they won't appreciate how quirky and
Yeah. They're
it is.
all their like cutting patterns and stuff, and then trying to match up checks on a single width is probably more difficult.
So there might actually be more wastage as well.
I'm not really sure. Like
if it's more difficult to match it, and
but it's just to do with that, like production efficiency really is why it's changed. Yeah, like we would have, my granddad, I guess, would have still been doing single width in the 70s, but then from like the 80s on, I think everything would have been double width. So they would have been double width hand looms, and then they would have started doing, like, they would have had dob cross looms. That was like an old shuttle loom style from the UK, but a power loom. I think you do an interview with Prickly Thistle?
Yeah.
So the same, my dad would have had those kind of looms in the 80s, and then moved to like power rapier looms in the early 90s, and then we've had a few more iterations of different power looms since then.
Right. I'm curious, has there ever been a Nike moment for Donegal Tweed?
Not for me yet, anyway.
Right. For those not familiar with it,
maybe
this was, when was it? Was it in the 90s when Harris Tweed was really not doing well?
Early 2000s.
Was it early 2000s?
I think early 2000s.
And Nike calls up one day and orders enough tweed to keep the whole island in business for the next several years.
I don't know if quite that.
Roughly speaking,
it's quite a big order anyway. But it's that could also be a combination of things weren't going well, and you get a big order, but then it also, because it was Nike and using it in a different product in a different way, it generates a lot more interest, and then like, inspires other brands to get in touch and do something similar. So like help rejuvenate the whole thing. For us, not especially. Like, I think our business has been kind of like consistent, or like it goes up and down based on trends, or even because we're quite a small mill, a couple of big orders can make a massive difference to the year. But no, so far no like enormous quantities.
I find it so depressing when I'm around looking at clothes and I see all these garments with horrific mixed fiber fabrics. And I'm thinking, you could have made that in a nice tweed, a nice 100% wool, which would have been so nice, and it would have lasted so long. And just.
But I think it's to do with like the garment, like the retail price of the garment, the fabric cost might only be like 8% or less. Maybe less, maybe like only 3% in some garments. The fabric input is so low in a lot of garments. So that's why they're using synthetic blends, because like they're not willing to pay for 100% wool or a different natural fiber.
There is this perception, though, that natural wool tweed is so expensive, but is it really?
Well, it'll last an awful lot longer, or maybe that's not the right way. Obviously, a synthetic thing is going to last a lot longer, but maybe it won't look very good after a short while.
No.
Yeah.
But even, Harris Tweed or Donegal Tweed, the price per meter isn't horrendous, is it?
No, not
I'm
ridiculous.
asking the wrong person, I guess. But
well, I think it's very reasonable.
Incredible value for money, yes.
But it depends on the brand's pricing structure and the amount of markup that they're expecting. Like maybe some brands that don't do a huge amount of marketing and social media and ad campaigns, they might be willing to have like a much higher cost of materials per garment. Yeah.
You're thinking they have less overheads, so they might
A little bit less overhead, or
spend less. Yeah.
yeah. So then they can probably, sometimes you'll end up with a lot more fabric cost in a garment and maybe a lot more CMT cost and not as much left over that they're not spending it on a load of marketing.
Mm.
Not that there's any
That's
marketing costs.
that is an interesting perspective, because I do see, say, jackets around the £800 mark, but some brands will be using Donegal tweed or Harris tweed, and others will use some horrific blend of something or other. And if I ask them, why aren't you using a proper tweed, natural fibers? And they'll say, oh, but if we'd done that, the cost would have been even higher. And it's like,
Yeah,
you're already.
to do with like the fabric cost, but this their CMT cost and their markups then afterwards, and whether if they're more direct to consumer versus if they're doing wholesale, then they have their markup and then the store needs their markup as well. So just like sometimes you can be like quite surprised at what the end product, the final cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite depressing to be buying things and you realize what the product actually cost to make back before it went through the rest of the
Yeah.
supply chain.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think the most expensive jacket made from our tweeds I've seen was like about $7,000. And that was a while ago. That was a few years ago now. It had like a little fur collar on it. It was
Okay.
like the same fabric as we sell to, like our same sort of fabric as we're selling to any other brand. But
Mm.
and obviously the fur part probably added a bit more to the cost. But it's still like like a substantial markup.
Mm.
You know?
Yes. There you
And like
go.
the CMT, like yes, you can use different sort of factories, like a really expensive factory in Italy versus like a really cheap factory in Bangladesh. You know, the cost of that part is vastly different.
Yeah. If I say the word sustainability,
Mm-hmm.
what do you put into that? This was a bit of a curveball, sorry.
Well, like, so for us, our main thing is that we try to use all natural fibers, but like, at least we try to be as sustainable as possible. Um, but within the fashion industry, it's like maybe we're making our fabric. Like sometimes we're using uh, Irish wool, so that the fabric or the sheep's been in a field in Galway or Wicklow or Donegal, and then that's spun and dyed in Kilcar, like 20 kilometers away from us, and then finished in Donegal as well. And so everything, in theory, could be done within like 20 kilometers.
Mm.
But that's not the reality of the vast majority of our fabric. Like a lot of it is a blend of different, like one of our main things is a blend of like Irish wool, British wool, Norwegian, and New Zealand. And that's
Gosh.
just to do with like the fiber length, the micron of the fiber, the like whiteness of the wool, the crimp, just the different combination that comes together, and obviously the price point of it as well. Um, and to give a certain handle. And but then if the wool's been shipped from New Zealand, but it's come on like a big ship in a container, so that's more efficient than it's not been flown in.
Mm.
Um, like our looms are quite efficient. They've been around for a long time now. Uh, but it's then after it leaves us, it could have very different impact. Like if it leaves us and is flown to China or Japan or India, and then it goes from there and is flown back to a warehouse in Europe or the US, and then is shipped to a retailer, and then is shipped from the retailer's warehouse to another shop, and then from that shop to the end customer. Like, there's a lot more miles that happen after it leaves us.
Yeah.
And we're trying to do our best from a using natural fibers and make the best quality fabric that we can, that we know it'll have a long life, that it's not none of it's ever going to be disposable garments. If a coat costs like €800 or €1,000, is not going to be a disposable one-time garment. At least you hope that it'll last a very long time and that it's good quality, and like that end of it you hope is what's making it a bit more sustainable. Is that what you
Makes sense. I mean, the quality aspect is certainly very important, because
Yeah.
if you have something you like and it works for a long time, you'll keep it for a long time.
Yeah. Like behind me here, it's a jacket I got on eBay, but it was from so it's like a tweed jacket I got on eBay, but it's from my great granduncle's company called Donegal.
Oh,
But
okay.
that was from the 1940s. But it's still like in really good nick. The lining obviously is a bit worn around the armpits or whatever, but it's still like in really good shape. And just like so similar to what we're still making today, and is still in really good condition. A few like maybe a couple of bites of a moth somewhere along the way. But like the idea that the garment can last that long is way better than if it's, let's say, it's all made within 20 miles, but it disintegrates after 10 washes, because you've still had all these inputs.
I think a lot of the time that the garment itself can actually last for a very long time, but then fashion comes along and sort of kills it, because it's totally unfashionable, so it ends up somewhere. Which is sad. You should only sell to places that make timeless garments, whatever that might be.
But even like for us, obviously, as styles have changed, and sometimes like now garments have been getting a little bit bigger and a bit more oversized, whereas 10-15 years ago they were all like quite tight, and that style has changed quite a bit. So a lot of people, maybe they have these like really good quality garments, but they're not really going to wear them because of the fit has changed so dramatically.
So, given your position in the fashion industry, what are your own garment clothes preferences? Are you something of a clothes horse, or are you sort of an Irish working man?
Well, most of the time in the mill, it's like a pair of work pants and a sweatshirt, because like I get dirty, like grease and dirt from the looms and stuff.
So you're not working in tweeds?
No, not really. Maybe I should be. I should be making myself some more like workwear jackets or overshirts.
I'm just thinking, when the busload of tourists arrive to inspect, you should be all kitted out,
Not so far. And like I have a good few like tweed jackets and suits and stuff, but they're like, when I'm doing my sales trips, let's say the sales time is from like June until October. But in like when I was in China, it was like 38 degrees, so I'm not wearing a tweed suit. Or in New York in July, it's not really tweed suit weather. So the kind of time for me to wear these garments is the autumn winter, when it's not my sales season. So the tweed suits and jackets don't do as much mileage maybe as me.
Oh, another thing crushed. You'd sort of expect you to be all tweeted up all the time, and all this,
Well, maybe if I had a slightly different role within the mill, that might be more of the case.
It's reality crashing with preconceptions, isn't
Mm-hmm.
it?
Mm-hmm.
So going forward now, what's happening for Molloy and Sons? Is there a new son on the way? Maybe
Not so far. I have two daughters. They're like 3 and 5. So maybe I'll have to change the name, in a few years' time. It's Molloy and Daughters.
Are they fully understood of the expectations of family obligations? I suppose.
Not so far, I don't think, but they do know what we do. They do come into the mill and bother us every few days. Yeah. But no, they're somewhat interested in what we do, and sometimes they're like, "I want a rainbow scarf." Then they made, then you try and make something to suit them, but then they're like, "I don't like it. It's got black in it. Go away."
It's got all these neps.
Yeah, I don't want those. There's brown in it.
So I was going to ask you whether recruiting more people into the weaving industry was difficult or easy, but given that you're primarily family and fairly small, I mean, is there room for expanding if the Donegal Tweed concept was going to be
yeah, like our hope would be that we'll still grow another bit. It depends from the recruiting point. It just depends on what role you're expecting. If it's like a role for someone to be weaving and or doing warping and stuff like that, that's mostly something that they'll have to be taught entirely from scratch, unless they've come from a different mill. But that's very unlikely. So it's like you have to just try and teach them along the way. And this, like for weaving, maybe the actual, if the loom's running and their job is to watch it and tie on a new like weft cone when the weft is running out, or fix a warp break, that's quite easy. Like you can learn that in a couple of weeks. That's like very basic end of it, but you still won't be able to see if you're making mistakes. So it's like a very slow process to learn. If it's a production job versus like a design job or a sales job is a very different question, I think. Or like things like the mending and inspection, like they take a lot of time and effort, and those are maybe more difficult jobs to fill or to teach someone. Like for me, it's kind of all happened by osmosis, really, by watching and the mill being outside, and it's very different than trying to take someone who's worked in an office and then be like, okay, now you're learning how to inspect fabric and this nep is the wrong color when they're looking at like a roll of fabric going past and you're trying to spot the flaws. Or if they're in a different type of factory, maybe they're only ever making one product, and then they come and work and we're changing things all the time in different colors and stuff. So the like colorblind test is very important. Yeah, because it's difficult now. Navies and blacks and different colors, they can't get them mixed up.
It sounds like it could be an interesting job. I do get the impression that sort of typical factory jobs are not very sexy for
not
young
at all.
people today.
Like at the minute, there's a hand weaving training course has been run by the local education training board this past maybe they've done it for 3 years now. And that's like quite a long course, but it's teaching people how to be a hand weaver, so that they're learning how to warp, they're learning how to weave, they're learning how to set up patterns and stuff like that. And that's actually accredited by the Highlands and Islands board because they have the Horace Tweed training. So there's like a link between the Donegal education board and the Highlands and Islands education board because of their Horace Tweed training course, and now the Donegal Tweed training course as well. And So it's is bringing in a bit more, a few more people into the industry. Maybe more of them have become self-employed than actually have gone into work in a mill, because maybe it's a bit more focused on independent creativity than the production side of
Yeah.
the like. It's very different being a self-employed hand weaver maybe than it is working in a factory doing the production end of the job.
Mm.
Yeah, but like I think it's an interesting job, but maybe someone else wouldn't really enjoy it as much. My end of it is very different. Like than
Yeah.
like if the job was in the mill all the time. Um, but some people really enjoy that. Like I also enjoy
Mm.
being in the mill and not having to answer emails for a few days.
Yeah. It does sound like, though, if what you're trying to do with the Donegal Tweed concept,
Mhm.
if that was to become protected, that there is an interest in the community and the region to actually scale up, and it could be
Yeah,
possible
yeah.
and
Like I think
could become viable.
it's it's like when you go to Harris, and so we've been over as visiting the different mills because of this training course, and it's just interesting to see like on the islands there, like how proud everyone is of the industry, and like there's so much Harris tweed in in the hotels or on the Logan Air, even on the headrests on the plane, and
Mm.
like in the stores, and there's a lot more people wearing Harris tweed, and there's so much of the like furniture and upholstery and stuff in different businesses,
Yeah.
whereas that's not as common here. But you would hope if we can get Donegal tweed protected, then it does become a bit more of a point of pride for the whole of the county, or indeed like the whole of Ireland, that there's these products that you can have like confidence in their authenticity and provenance and
Yeah.
story, that that then generates a lot more interest. And in
Mm.
turn, like I think, let's say in Harris Tweed, like 15 years ago, maybe the workforce was also quite old and difficult to hire in new staff. Whereas now I think it's like there's so many different roles, and like marketing job or sales job or admin job or production management job. Like there's a lot of different roles available, and their like average age of workforce has come down dramatically. So maybe we'd
Mm.
hope if we can also like increase demand and interest in Donegal Tweed, that will also happen for us. That there'll be a bit more interest um, in younger people joining the industry.
Mm. I mean, it's clear in the Hebrides how much important the tweed industry is
Yeah,
for life on the islands. If
yeah,
that was to collapse, there isn't that much else going on.
hmm hmm yeah. Like around here, so we're really close to Killybegs. It's a big fishing port, so there's work in like the different fish factories or the engineering factories and stuff. Or like there's also quite a few like closer to Donegal town or Letterkenny. There's like a lot of pharma and biotech kind of jobs available as well.
Mm.
So maybe people like a lot more service jobs than production jobs. Like people don't necessarily see production jobs particularly like interesting, but sometimes it can be. At least like if you're in a mill, it's normally quite warm and soft, a bit more colorful.
I think if you can create a modern factory, I had Crown Northampton was 3 episodes ago,
Mhm.
and he's created a very modern factory where
Right.
people are treated in modern ways, and
Yeah,
it seems to work well. Plus, they get trips abroad to
yeah,
trade shows and stuff. And
yeah,
it becomes so much more than just doing a factory job.
yeah, yeah,
I think people expect more now than just a job,
yeah.
which is why it can be a bit hard to fill factories, I suppose.
Mhm.
Mm. I hope you achieve what you're trying to do with Donegal Tweed. But it's been ongoing for quite a while now, hasn't it?
Yeah, so I think like the first time the EU started talking about it was about 10 years ago, maybe longer. I think I filled out the first like EU survey maybe 2012, 2013. So it's been like slow and trundling bureaucratic process. But it's like the legislation is passed, and so it is going to happen that these different craft products around the EU can apply for protection, and in the same way as champagne can only be produced in Champagne region,
Yeah.
or so like it is going to happen, and it's just whether we can get across the line with our description and what we want to get protected. But I think like we're pretty confident we will.
Hmm.
So like I've been at a couple of conferences in the EU IPO, that's the European Intellectual Property Office. So talk, they had a big conference on it earlier this year, so I was over at that talking at it. And next week I'm going to a different conference in Finland about the PGI thing as well. And yeah, I think the first applications can be put in December this year.
Okay.
So like it is like moving, just it's so slow. But it's not about like we're not expecting like an immediate like massive interest in explosion and work. It's more about the long term preservation of the industry, making it like removing a bit of the cyclical nature of it, giving clarity to customers and consumers that they know if it says Donegal Tweed that it's come from County Donegal. So
Yeah.
that's for us what it's about, like the long term protection and sustainability of the industry instead of like maybe I don't know 25 years ago 30 years ago there were maybe 20 different mills in Donegal, maybe not quite 20 but like there was a huge
Mm-hmm.
amount and then an awful lot of hand weavers and independent people producing tweed, whereas now it's down to like four mills and then a bunch of hand weavers. And a couple of bad years could definitely like reduce those numbers more. At
Mm.
least now we're down to kind of like it's family businesses, so at least they're like more likely to last or start up a new iteration if things don't go well. But the hope is that there'll be more interest and more people get involved. And even if that means more mills opening in Donegal and more competition, I think there's enough coats in the world that we can all make a bit of Donegal tweed and get by.
Well, I think people just have to be more aware of what they're buying when they buy something that is described as Donegal, and ask questions about, I mean, where does it come from? And if
Yeah,
it contains synthetics, it's probably not. And
yeah,
if it's
fair
just
chance.
plain cotton, it certainly isn't.
Yeah, but
I mean, it is nice to buy something that is proper, that is real, that is the. I mean, that's why we don't buy knockoffs.
yeah, so that like there's a bit of story behind it, and like if they buy a jacket that's from us, it's made by our little family on the side of a hill in Donegal.
This is why people have stopped asking me about clothes I'm wearing, because everything I wear has such a story that, oh, please stop. I wasn't
Just
interested,
kidding,
really.
jacket, Nick.
So, yeah. Hmm. There you go. Okay, Kieran, in sort of wrapping things up, is there anything we should have mentioned?
um,
Anything cool happening? Any radical new colourful pattern you've designed?
I don't think of anything like of major note.
No incredibly interesting, cool designer who's bringing out something that you're just in awe of and had a part in?
Um, but see, I'm not really. A lot of these things I'm not allowed to talk about until the garment is in the wild and has our name on the inside. If it doesn't mention us, we're not allowed to mention it.
But if you just don't mention the brand names, you just say
Yeah,
something.
I don't know. Like probably we've started doing a bit more women's wear fabrics, whereas we had been very much more menswear focused. So we started like adding a bit more women's wear, different patterns, and that into our collection. And then what else are like blankets and scarves that we also sell. So we sell those like on our website, and then also we sell to like a bunch of stores. We do like private label where we develop blankets or scarves for different brands. So we'll work with them, make their own patterns and stuff. And so that's quite a big part of our business now, that like making bespoke patterns and that, and developing things for customers is maybe, I don't know, 40%, 50% of what we probably produce is where it's been developed specially for a customer. Or like the blankets or throws, that's probably like 20%, 25% of our production now. Whereas before COVID, or we just started, like we had been making blankets and stuff for private label for a long time, and but we hadn't been selling our own range of stuff. And so that's kind of been growing steadily since then. And from a newness point, I don't know if I can really tell you much. Our main focus, like at the minute, like is the hope that we can get Donegal Tweed protected. That's like where a lot of my focus is at the minute.
I will ask you one final question. There's a lot made of the fact, or there's a lot made of that the colours of both your tweeds and Harris tweeds are sort of from the landscape surrounding where you work and live.
Yes.
Do you often mosey out in the morning with a mug of tea and look out over the landscape and that's it?
I don't know.
And then you go in and
like,
design something?
In a way, yes. But like we're in the countryside. There's so much sort of nature around us all the time. We're right beside the coast. There's like beaches and sea and mountains and cliffs and heathers, and there's a lot of colours available. And I think like definitely it does have an impact, but also we do, need a nice mid-brown sometimes, or a nice like gray.
Couldn't that just be an old Vauxhall Viva passing by in a nice mid-brown?
But like it's about having a spectrum of colors, and that some of them, yes, are like when we're developing them with the spinner, you're like, sometimes it is based on an image, and you're like, I really like that kind of tone of a teal kind of color from down at the beach, or there's that really nice mossy color, or some lichen kind of color, and that is somewhat of an inspiration, but then it has to also be a bit on the practical end of things.
So the answer was a resounding yes and no.
Yes. It depends on the customer and the color. Like if we're making like a bright pink, it probably hasn't been inspired dramatically by the nature surrounding us.
Okay. Okay, Kieran. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thanks very much, Nick.
Bye-bye for now, Kieran.
Right.
And I hope life is good in Donegal.
Yeah. Cheers, Nick. Thanks very much.